Right, hello. As people are coming in, I am going to share some resources in the chat. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's see, you cannot see my screen right now, so I'm going to get that going. There we go. Okay. So as you are all coming in, I am going to put some resources in the chat. These are going to be not exactly our notes for the day, or not the slides for the day, but the cliff notes. So these are going to be, this is going to be everything that you need as far as resources. And as you're joining, I would just love to see, where are you coming from? So where are you at in the world, in the US? I know we have people from all over the globe here, so just put that in the chat. I am coming to you from mid-Michigan, so I live in Lansing, Michigan, which is the state capital. I'm curious to see where other people are coming from, so go ahead and toss that in the chat. All right, California. Nice. Thanks for joining, Darren. Texas. All right, Cheryl. And then again, that link is going to bring you to all the resources that you need. Yeah, so it is, we got Colorado, cool. Yeah, it is 4 o'clock almost my time, so it is getting into the evening at this point, right? Larissa, thank you for joining. Excited to see you here. I hope your session went really well. So how did it go? We had a session at the same time earlier. I'm gonna watch that, great, that's awesome. I'm gonna watch that recording because I wanna know all about School AI. I have not checked out that tool yet, so. All right, it is 4 o'clock and I'm a fan of starting on time. So I'm going to get started, and in the chat, I went ahead and put the link for all of the resources that you're going to need for today. So again, I don't have my slides, but I've got all of the cliff notes. So really, hopefully anything that you would need is there, and I'll be continuously sharing that throughout the session today. So for the first question, the first thing I want to know is who's in the room. So what's your role in education? And also, how often do you currently use AI? I recognize some people here. I know we've got some AI users. So this survey works really well from your phone. If you want to just scan the QR code, it's a quick 2-question survey, but I'm also just going to drop a link in the chat that you could use as well. And we'll see where people are coming from, just to set the stage for what we're doing today. The purpose is really for you science teachers to learn about some ways that you can use AI, not only to save you time, but also to enhance instruction and elevate what you're already doing. So my role is going to be to share examples, framework, and your role is to really think about, how does this apply to you directly? And even if you're not a science teacher, I guarantee you're going to walk away with something new or new ideas. So it's not just for science teachers. And some suggestions for today: I encourage you to try to be engaged and fully present. I know that with a virtual conference, that is really hard to do. So whatever that looks like for you is fine. If you are open to having your camera on, that's great. It's not, I get it if you're not. I was taking care of laundry the other day while I was doing a session, so my camera was off for that. But we'll also have times where I encourage you to interact and try out some of these things. So just a reminder that the more engaged you are, the more you're going to get out of this session as well. So let me just go ahead and check on this audience poll and see who we've got in the room. So go to my responses here. So look, we've got a wide variety of people. We've got some secondary teachers, elementary teachers. We've got admin, some other higher education. That's incredible. I love seeing a diverse crowd here. And then we'll get to that other question in a minute. Let me not forget to put my presentation back up. Here we go. All right, so here are some of the learning objectives for today. I'm hoping that you walk away with an understanding. Okay, yeah, I totally get that, Cheryl. Yep. So I hope you walk away today with an understanding of how to create really good prompts for any subject area, but we're going to look at some really specific science examples and applications of how you can use AI, again, not only to save you time, but also to enhance instruction and specifically inquiry-based learning. If you are, I know we've got people from all over the place here, but in the US, we have these NGSS science standards that are really, really robust and tricky and hard to figure out. And so AI can be an essential tool to help us with all of that. Hey, Matt, glad to see you here as well. Larissa said your session went great, so that's awesome. All right. So what I want to know in the chat is, I'm curious, think about the game of school. All right. So I'm calling it the game of school. You know what I mean when I say that. How many of you were good at it? How many of you were pretty good at playing the game of school? Throw it in the chat. What are your thoughts? All right. Just be honest. It's okay to toot your own horn here. Matt was amazing at the game of school. I bet. Um, yeah, I fall into that category too. I was pretty good at the game of school, and especially, when I went to college, it got harder for sure. It got harder, but I was pretty good. I was still pretty good at it, and I'm quite the nerd, so I actually liked studying, especially because I got to study science, and that's my jam. But I was pretty good at the game of school, and when I read this book right here, so the keynote speaker, Dr. Agarwal, if you were able to see that, when I read this book, Powerful Teaching, a light bulb went off for me because I realized this is why I was good at the game of school. I had just never been able to put it down into simple terms before, the way that it's laid out in this book. So when I say you should go read this book, I mean it. Okay. These are if you also were good at school, you'll probably read this and go, oh yeah, I did kind of do that on my own. And so I just highly recommend you read that. And this was a big epiphany for me. And I thought, I have to share this with everybody. So I did. I started leading professional development and loaning this book out to teachers left and right. So it was a real honor to see Dr. Agarwal speak today earlier. And I had a similar type of epiphany aha moment when I discovered ChatGPT. So it was December of 2022. I had heard about this thing that English teachers were really upset about because it was writing essays for students. I got on, I think the first thing I used it for was to write a letter of resignation. And it was one of those, I was really procrastinating on this. And it was just like the blank page, it was stifling me. And this was able to get me over that hump and moving forward. And it was just incredible. Then I started using it for lesson plans and other creative ideas. And I went down the rabbit hole and I never came back up. So, this was also one of those things that I thought, I have got to share this with everybody because this is transformative. So I did something I thought I would never do, jumped on TikTok and started making videos. And so I recommend that you check out that and connect with me. I'm on all of these platforms. We've also got some other great influencers in the house, people who make content about AI. Go ahead, and if you have a channel, go ahead and throw it in the chat as well so people can follow you too, because it's really, we've established such a really cool community just on TikTok, but we're all over these other platforms as well. So check that out. And a little bit about my background. I am so passionate about science, and I taught that for 10 years and then moved into the role of coaching, and now I'm an instructional coach and curriculum director. So I do have that K-12 bird's eye view of how this can all work and work together for all different levels. But I love talking about science specifically because that's where my true passion lies when it comes to education. So here's a quick overview of some of the things that we're going to do today. And so we'll go a little bit into some prompt engineering, look at some specific science examples. You'll be able to try them out, and then we're going to do a closing. So what I want to do before we move on is just to peek at this second question that I asked, which was, how often do you currently use AI? And we've got a lot of advanced users here, which is great. And then we've got some people who are kind of all over the board as far as, not really yet, but I plan to. And this is an AI conference. So there's going to be more AI users in here than in a typical setting. But the reason why I want to ask this question is because there was a survey done recently, and I'm sure I keep seeing this on the weight screens that Evergreen has about, what's the percentage of teachers who've used AI. And we could see that a lot of teachers haven't started yet, and that's okay. I know we have at least one admin in the house, so I'm going to say, if you read the study from EdWeek, it also provides the reasons why most teachers have not tried AI. And the number one reason is they don't feel like they have time and they've got too much other stuff going on. So it is so important for admin and leaders to give teachers time in professional development to learn about and explore some of these tools. And I also want to point out, when we hear AI, a lot of us think about ChatGPT right away or Google Gemini or these new tools. And the reality is that we have been using artificial intelligence for a really long time in ways that you might not even know about. So when you go on to Netflix and it suggests a show for you or a movie, that is artificial intelligence. When you're using Grammarly, that's AI. When you even use your facial recognition software on your phone, right? These are all examples of artificial intelligence. But what really was a game changer are these large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, and Google Gemini, right? And so the big deal here in 2022 in November when ChatGPT came out is that it was using information from the internet, this huge, vast source of knowledge, and it was able to generate human-like text. So we are going to we're going to be focusing on those things, and just know that when you talk about AI, it's really important to be specific about which type of AI are you talking about. And so one of the things that I want to point out, is why should teachers care? Obviously you care, you're here, but you might go back and you might be talking to teachers who are in that boat of, I don't have time for this, or, AI is scary. I don't want nothing to do with it. Okay, so feel free. This is an analogy that you can share with those people who maybe are a little hesitant. So imagine that I gave you a plank of wood, some nails, and a hammer. And I said, your goal is to get these nails into this piece of wood. Pretty simple, right? Here's the catch. You cannot use the hammer, right? That would be a very frustrating situation. And you could probably get the nails into the piece of wood after a long period of time. Have you ever seen on TikTok? I guess this is going down a rabbit hole too, but there's this guy who tries to cut a whole tree with a plastic knife. And so it could happen. It's just a frustrating situation. And as teachers, it's so important for us to use every single tool that we have available. And we have a tough job. We're trying to help our students understand some really complex topics, and we need every single tool that we have available in our toolbox. So it's so important that we don't leave these behind. And I'll tell you what, AI is one hell of a hammer. It is a really powerful tool. And if we're not using it, we're not only doing, I feel like people think about AI and ChatGPT and they think, oh, teachers who use that are lazy. Teachers who use that are just, cutting corners. And the reality is that if I had a child, I would want them to have a teacher who uses AI, because when teachers use AI correctly, it's not only going to save them time, but it's really beneficial for students, and it's going to elevate their experience in your classroom if you're using it correctly, right? So I get that AI is scary, and a lot of times people assume that just because I talk about AI that I think it's the best thing ever and I'm not worried about it at all. And that's just not the reality. The reality is that like any other tool and any other thing, any other type of human innovation, it can be used in helpful ways. So think about a hammer. I'm going to continue with that analogy. It can be used to build and create and construct. It can be used in really helpful ways, but it can also be used in really destructive and harmful ways. So even when we're thinking about a tool as simple as a hammer, there's that duality, there's the dichotomy. And the same exists for AI tools and tools like ChatGPT. And the same exists think about social media, for example, right? There's so many great things about social media, and there's also so many ways that it can be harmful. The thing is, I want to be involved in this conversation. I want to be part of it, and I think it's vital that educators are. That educators are talking about how it can be used in positive ways. Because if nobody's talking about this over here, this conversation's already happening too. And so there needs to be a balance. So if you are hesitant or fearful or working with people who are hesitant and skeptical, that's okay. Remind them, there's so many examples of this throughout history, and we got to be talking about the positive ways to use it. Let me get into a little bit of some science talk here, because I am a science nerd. And I love talking to science teachers about this because ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, these are all large language models, and we use scientific models all the time. Think about the model of the solar system. You know, that's something that if you're teaching astronomy, you get your students to think about that, how our model of the solar system has changed over time. And a scientific model is really just any simplified representation of a complex phenomena. And the purpose of a model is usually to make predictions, understand complex processes, or test hypotheses. And I love this quote about scientific models, but it's true for AI and ChatGPT as well. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Think about weather prediction models, right? Those are most certainly wrong. But doesn't mean it's not useful. You know, I live in Michigan, so it is commonly wrong, like vastly, like it'll be way off, right? But I'm pretty sure this weekend, I haven't checked in the last 6 hours, but I'm pretty sure this weekend we're going to have some above average temperatures. And so I've tried to kind of clear my schedule because I want to be able to go enjoy that. All right. So what I notice is that when teachers have a realistic, actually anyone, when anyone uses AI and they have a realistic expectation going into it, they're going to be a lot happier than the person who goes into it thinking it's going to create this perfect, polished, finished product every single time. And so mindset is important here. And one website I'm going to refer to a lot is AI for Education. And that's where I got this. So I'll provide that link later as well. But it's just important to know, you know, I like this 80-20 rule. And generative AI can increase productivity, but the outputs must always be made your own. You always have to have ownership of that output. And around 3 to 20, that's a wide range, around 3 to 20% of chatbot outputs are inaccurate, which is called a hallucination. And we have to be on the lookout for those constantly, especially in science. It's taking, like I said earlier, it's taking all this information from the internet. Let's face it, not the most reliable place. Not everywhere on the internet is great. And so it's just so important that we are aware of that human aspect is so important to make sure that we're checking the outputs. All right, that being said, let's get into some prompt engineering. So we're going to look at some examples today, and you're going to get a chance to do some prompt engineering yourself. And one thing to note, and I'm sure you've heard this already, I've heard it in a lot of sessions, your input is going to be equal to your output. So the quality of your prompt is very important, but I have great news for you. You're teachers, so you already know how to do this because you're great at giving really specific instructions and you're great at giving feedback. You have to do this all the time, right? And that's exactly what you're doing when you're creating a prompt. Some people explain it as, imagine that you have an intern who is new at the job and they don't really know the ropes, so you have to be very specific when you're explaining to them what you want them to do. It's similar when you're working with AI. So here is another graphic from AI for Education. And I want you to just put in the chat, what do you notice about this example, the best example, versus the original one, the okay example? So go ahead and type in the chat, what do you notice? Right, so I'm noticing there's a lot of details. It's very specific. And I will also say, like, if you're looking at this and thinking, that's a lot to write each time, don't worry, I have a better solution, okay? So this example here is more detailed, and it also has, actually both of these have a role. What you want the outcome to look like, that's important too. And so I'm going to share a prompting framework that I have found to be very helpful for all levels of educators. And whether you're an expert with AI or you're just starting, this seems to be a really good kind of blueprint or framework. So I was in Joe Marquez's session yesterday about prompting, and he said, I don't like to call it a framework, I like to call it a blueprint, because you don't have to have every single one of these elements each time. And he's right. I don't always have all of these, but this is a really good blueprint to kind of get you started and allow you to think, do I have all of the correct elements there? So this is called the prep prompt. So you want to introduce what you want, give it a role or a voice, be really explicit and add those details, but then also set parameters for the answer. What do you want it to look like? Okay. Um, and this is not my framework. This came from Daniel Fitzpatrick, who is huge in the world of AI, and he has a great book that goes through all of this. And in the resource document, which I'll talk about more in a minute, I've linked the post where he talks about this as well. So we're going to try this out. We're going to try out creating some prompts together. And so I am going to put in the chat a link for the resource doc. And what you'll notice is that there is this group prompt doc right on there. So I want everyone to click into that. And I am going to put that in the chat as well. So here's the direct link to the document. There we go. And we're going to try it out. So looks like I've got some people on here, which is a good thing. So I want you to think about your role as a science teacher, because we've got, that's our focus here today. So I'm curious what science applications we have. I want you to find a spot, put your name, and then let's create a prompt. So go ahead and put in what is the task that you want it to do. Give it a role or a voice. Be really specific. Sometimes this is a standard. Sometimes this is a topic or a learning target, and then some parameters. And you don't have to have all of these. So it's okay if you're like, I don't know what parameters I want. I'm going to do a pre-prompt. I'm just going to do the PRE. That's fine. I'm curious what people's ideas are for science. What are some prompts that we could use? Ooh, plate tectonics. I can't imagine how helpful these tools would be for virtual teaching, because there's just fewer curriculum options for virtual teaching. And when you look up like, I want a lesson plan for this, you're usually going to find a face-to-face lesson plan idea. You're going to find more of those certainly than virtual. So all right, got lesson plan ideas. Oh, okay. I'm glad we've got someone doing an assessment prompt. That's great. I'll just name something really cool that I'm seeing is a lot of people are focusing on making things fun and engaging, which that's an awesome way to use AI to not just save time, but elevate what you're doing. Matt, it's a great prompt. You're sharing a great prompt for us to try out. Almost like you've done this before.
Just a few times, Carly.
Yeah,
Only a few times.
that's awesome. This is great. I'm seeing a lot of people using it as I use it a lot, which is that brainstorming buddy. Something to help me think outside of my own typical thought patterns. Um, Being creative is fun, but it's, sometimes you are not always feeling it. And sometimes, even when you are in the creative flow, getting another idea can be so powerful and helpful. And one thing I notice is there's been many times where I start using ChatGPT for something, and I'm just kind of like, oh, whatever. I got to make this lesson plan. I got to make a sub plan or do something. By by the end of it, by like maybe 10 minutes in, I'm like, I'm excited. Like I'm leaning in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a cool lesson. So it can be really inspiring to use AI that way. And then the assessment part, I'm glad that someone's using that because it is so difficult to design high quality assessments. And this is one area where I've heard people say like, oh, well, if teachers use AI to create a test, they're being lazy because they should write it themselves. And I'll just say, I don't think those people know how education works because usually wealthier districts have access to item banks and pre-made assessments. There's never been an expectation in education that teachers have to write every assessment. It tends to be smaller rural schools or schools with less funding that don't have access to item banks and questions that are standards aligned. And as a middle school teacher, I had to write all my own assessments from scratch, and that took forever. This can help you do it so much more quickly. And again, it's not just beneficial for me as the teacher, it's beneficial for students to have those high quality assessments. So I feel that there's a big, potential for equity among different schools here as well. So next level chef, that sounds really cool. Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, these are great ideas. So if you were, just for the more beginners in the room, if you were interested, I recommend creating again a document where you're going to keep all your prompts. You can even, this document that I shared today, the resource doc, you could, I believe it's a PDF, but I think you can switch it into Google Docs if you want, and you could use this as a starting point if you wanted to. But you're not going to want to write this out every single time. You're going to want to have it somewhere where you can come back to it. And so I'm going to pick one of these. Oh, Star Wars. Okay, I'm giving this, Lisa, I hope you don't mind if I use this as an example. I'm going to copy your prompt and head over to, you can use you can use any large language model. I'm going to use ChatGPT, and I'm just going to paste it in here and see what it comes up with. Is Andrew here? No, I don't think he is, but yeah, I love the Star Wars reference. So one thing I want to say, you can see it comes up with something pretty quick, and this is kind of an outline. And what I want to really emphasize is that the greatest outputs from any of these large language models rarely come after the first prompt. It is usually after a back and forth. So remember earlier I said you have to be really good at giving directions, which you are, you're a teacher, but you also have to be good at giving feedback. And that's where that part comes in, is usually after your first generation, you're going to say, I like this part of it. Can you expand on that? Or can you change this or make it more, whatever it is that you want to add, you've got to be able to give it that feedback. Okay. All right. See you, Matt. Thanks. So just keep that in mind as you're working too. Usually it's not the first draft, and I'm going to show some examples of that too. Okay. So let's go back to another thing I want to point out is that it doesn't always, when I first started this, I was like, the prep framework is the way to go, and it has to be always the prompt, it has to go in order. And the reality is there's no rules. There's no rules like that. You can do these in any order. And as you start writing prompts more and more, you're going to find a flow that's really comfortable for you. And so here's a prompt that I use to generate claim, evidence, and reasoning conclusion prompts for students. So that was something our science department said, let's do claim, evidence, reasoning, conclusions, but we had no resources in our curriculum for that. And AI is great at helping us out with that. But you'll notice that my prompt is somewhere in the middle. I usually start with the role because that just feels natural to me. And from there, I just kind of sprinkle in whatever the explicit details are and the parameters, usually at the end, but they can go anywhere. So there's not a right or wrong way to do this. Before I forget, I jumped ahead of myself. This was a repeat session. So if you scroll down, you'll see all of the wonderful prompts from the previous group as well. Okay, so I just really encourage you to check those out. And I do want to share, I'll delete these rows. I do want to share after this has been something that has been on my mind for weeks, this Mario Kart end of unit project idea. And I finally had to see, I'm a gamer. I finally had to see what AI would come up with for this because I taught Newton's laws of motion. And I'll tell you what, this is a pretty good starting point for a project. So make sure you check out all of these prompt ideas. And I appreciate you all being willing to share your thoughts too. And one other part of this, every time I do this prompt building activity with people, I think of a way to use ChatGPT that I had never thought of before. And I want to highlight how the human element is still so important. And that's just one example of it. I mean, I've been using these tools left and right, and still every time I do this, there's something new. And it's that element of human creativity that's so important. Okay. So this document, once again, I'll put this in the chat. These are the resources that I wanted to share. And this prep prompt framework is great. But recently the author or creator released his updated version, and he calls it now the prepare model. And the reason why I introduce it as the prep model first is because I think that this is a little much. Like if I have to remember all 7 things for every single prompt that I do, that feels a little exhausting. And the reality is the prep prompt, just these 4 things, if you have them, you're going to have a pretty good output. These other aspects are useful, but I don't use them every time. But here, because we have some advanced users in the room, I do want to share some of these tips. So especially if you're doing a long-term project, like a unit plan or something kind of big, I love asking ChatGPT at the end, what questions do you have for me in order to make this a high quality plan or whatever it is that you're making? And the beauty of this is that it spits out these questions that I'm now answering. Imagine it's for a unit plan and it's asking me, how long is this going to take? What are your students' prior knowledge? Are there any misconceptions that you anticipate? And through the process of answering those questions, I actually get much clearer myself on what I want the unit plan to look like. And so it's almost like having a mini coaching session with this AI tool. So I love adding this to larger projects. You can ask it to rate its response. And so that's a useful way to kind of it's not foolproof. You still might have some hallucinations and inaccuracies, but this is going to give you some insight into whether, how serious are those, how closely do I need to look at this for hallucinations? And then this one's just kind of funny, but there is research showing that this helps. So if you appeal to its emotions, not by saying like, please and thank you, but by saying like, you must do this. So you'll see that in a lot of my prompts. I use that one a lot. You can also add, you will be penalized if this is wrong, or I'm going to tip you money for a better solution. So there is actual research showing that these things help you get a better output. Not necessary, but it helps. And then the other thing, here's just some additional prompting tips. And I've talked about a lot of these, but every prompt is unique. You don't have to have all these components. Provide feedback. say you must, I need you to do. And I'm surprised that this one isn't in that framework anywhere. It's really helpful to include intended audience. Okay. Thanks, Larissa. Appreciate the support. Okay, so let's get into the science examples. So this is where I'm going to show, I have on this document that everyone has access to, I've included some sample prompts that you can use that are very specific to teaching science. And so what I'm going to show you first is this claim evidence reasoning prompt. And I have a boring version and I have a creative version. So the creative version is really asking the tool, and let me pull up this so you can see the video of me actually trying it out. So you'll just paste that into ChatGPT and you'll put in your grade level, right? This is for a high school teacher who's teaching biology, and they're going to talk about natural selection. And I want ChatGPT to come up with some claim evidence reasoning prompts for my students. And so you can see this is prompt number 3 is pretty creative, but the data that it gives me is kind of basic. And I presented a very similar session last weekend on this, and someone asked, they were like, I love the creative prompt that it came up with, but what I really need is a more complex data set. And I didn't have a great answer then, but I do now because I spent some time digging in and thinking, how can I get a more complex data set for these claim evidence reasoning prompts? And believe it or not, Google Gemini comes to save the day. So I gave Google Gemini my creative claim evidence reasoning prompt. It came up with great engaging scenarios. And it gave me at first a really basic data set. And so I said, so again, your best outputs are going to be after a conversation. And so I said, modify prompt number 3, which by the way was about slime. Imagine a group of high school students are on a field trip to a virtual, wait, no, this isn't the one. I'll show you later. So it's about slime during a high school science project. Here we go. A slime mold escapes and starts growing rapidly in the school's greenhouse. Super fun prompt. And I wanted it to create some more complex data. Check this out. This is way better than I've gotten on any other tool. It gave me some nice realistic numbers. That was another thing I added, is I said, make a more complex data table with realistic numbers that students can analyze. And I also want to point out that in Google Gemini, you can export any table directly to Google Sheets, which is really cool. But then I took it a step further, right? And I said, provide a rubric to help me grade this. I also asked it to come up with sample responses, a high quality response, which this is pretty great. But I also wanted a medium and a low quality. And I just laughed when it showed me this because I'm like, yep, there would definitely be a handful of students that would turn this in and say, there's my conclusion. And so what I love about this is now I could actually use this and give it to students and say, hey, what do you think about this conclusion? What are some good things about it? And where does it need improvement? And so that way you're really giving students that opportunity to analyze and evaluate a different conclusion. Now, let's go back to what Dr. Agarwal was saying earlier about how students need practice and they need opportunities where they can retrieve information from out of their brains. And that goes for even skills like writing conclusions. So that's why I love this tool. I mean, there are a lot of times when teaching science, you'll do an investigation, and then at the very end, they write a conclusion about it. But that's not enough practice. That's not enough opportunities of retrieving how to write a good conclusion. And so now with AI, I can give students more opportunities like that to practice applying their knowledge. And that's what she was talking about earlier. Students need practice with applying their knowledge. Here's another one. So this prompt is also in this document. I believe it's down sample data sets right here. Okay. So there's a decent amount you got to plug in here. But I was working with a science teacher, and her students had just gotten done doing an investigation where they calculated the speed of a car, but they needed more practice. They needed more practice finding the app, like just dealing with data tables in general and finding average speed and determining the speed of a moving object. And so we decided to make it really fun for these middle school students with the help of ChatGPT. So I used that prompt and we tried to make it interesting for them. So this first one was all about Fortnite. And they had to figure out which Fortnite player was the fastest. So I asked the teacher, I'm like, how did that go? And she said they loved it. And she had never seen them so excited to do a worksheet. So that's saying a lot with eighth graders. And in the third scenario, we did it about Taylor Swift. So people loved that. The kids loved that. And then they wrote their own scenario. So this just took what would have been a pretty boring task for students. Not to mention, as a teacher, this would have taken forever to do on your own. This would almost be like we don't have that kind of time, right? And so we were able to create this. We also added, she talked about, Dr. Agarwal talked a little bit about a desired difficulty earlier. You want to make things just challenging enough for students, not so challenging that they give up. But you'll notice with these different scenarios, in this first one, they had 4 trials. And in some of the other problems they had, in this one, they only had 3 trials. That was a desired difficulty because we wanted them to slow down and really think about what the question was asking. So you can get real specific with what you need and what you want students to be working on with this tool. Another example of a science-specific application is talking about driving questions or real-world phenomena. So that's something that is really, we know as science teachers, it's good to have a driving question or to have a phenomena that you show at the beginning of the unit to get students excited. But I have spent hours researching and looking for the perfect phenomena. And now we can have an assistant to help us do that. And it comes up with really good ideas. So there's a prompt for this as well in that document. So feel free to check these out and use them. I'm going to show you a little bit later a prompt library that you can access. I also want to know and encourage people in the chat, are there any other science applications that you have used? So feel free to just throw it in the chat, or maybe while you were watching today, you came up with a new idea. All right. I encourage you to share those and throw those ideas in the chat as they come up. Okay. So what we've been talking about so far is how to create your own prompts. And there are a lot of tools out there that are basically pre-made prompt tools. So these are things that you don't have to have extensive knowledge on how to prompt to use them. And my top 3 for science teachers, and I'll show examples of each, are Magic School, EduAid, and Brisk. And when you go to some of these tools like EduAid, it's really easy to use because you just click a button, and there's so many on EduAid here. There's so many to choose from. You just click a button, type in a topic, and click go. And so it simplifies the prompt is on the back end here. And so sometimes people say, why do I need to know how to prompt if I can just use these tools? And here's what I think is the most important reason why. If you know how to write a good prompt, it's almost like knowing how to cook for yourself, how to cook, how to prepare your own meals. And when you're using some of these pre-made prompt tools, it's like going out to eat for the night, right? It's like going out to a restaurant or getting takeout. And there's benefits to both. Like I cook for myself all the time. I love cooking. But you know what? I also like going out to eat because sometimes it might create a better product than I can myself. It also might be easier, and I don't feel like cooking tonight. This is going to save me some time. And so these pre-made prompt tools, and there's a ton out there. These are really helpful too. And I'm going to show a few today. I just want to caution you whether you are feeling overwhelmed, because there's just so many tools out there, and sometimes people can get exhausted by that. Um, so just be aware of that. You don't have to know them all. You don't have to try them all. I would say try a few here and there. I know sometimes I get AI FOMO and I just want to know about like every single tool that's out there. But these are all great tools, and they're all going to be useful. Okay. So don't get bogged down by that. Just check out a few of them. So one of the things I love about EduAid is there's a ton of great tools, but there's this taxonomy scaffolding tool where you can put in, I suggest using a learning target. Like here we have students can determine the speed of a moving object, and it will break down different questions using Bloom's taxonomy, which is incredible. This is one of those examples of how it's not just going to save you time as the teacher. This is going to be beneficial for students because now I have scaffolded warm-up questions. I have scaffolded exit tickets. I have scaffolded retrieval practice, right? And so this is just really helpful. I know as a teacher, I have sometimes been guilty of, I'll do a few questions where students are remembering, and then I'll jump all the way down here to analyzing, and I'll skip these. So just know this is this is just one of many tools on EduAid. Another great tool is Magic School that you've probably heard of. And there's all of these options to choose from. I love the Make It Relevant tool because this allows you to put in what you're teaching. So let's say I was a 10th grade teacher talking about particle motion, but my students don't really care about it. And so I'm going to go here and put in, you know what, my students are from a small rural farming community in mid-Michigan. Can we make it relevant for them? And what this tool will do is give me 3 examples of how I could apply what we're learning and the topic to things that involve farming. This is also an excellent way to get a driving question or a phenomena for your unit or for a mini unit. So I highly recommend this Make It Relevant tool. And then another one that is great is called Brisk. So this is a Chrome extension. All of these are freemium tools, meaning, they cost money to use all the features, but you'll at least have access to some of them. And so Brisk, I've used the free version and it's been still really helpful. So what you can do with Brisk is you can find an article online, and here is an article about, oops, I went a little too far. Here's an article about, a new planet found in the habitable zone of a star. And so if I was teaching high school astronomy or middle school astronomy, I would use the Brisk extension, which is down here. And first of all, it'll tell you the reading level of the current article. But then what you can do is say, I want you to change it for me to be at a 7th grade level or a 6th grade level. You can change it to anything you want, and you can even change the language, okay? So I'm kind of struggling to get my video to work here, but that's okay. What it will do is it will pop up, it'll open up a Google document and just start changing it to that reading level. So just with a click of the button, I say, Brisk, change this to a 7th grade reading level. It's going to open up a Google Doc and just start going. So this is a really helpful tool. One of my favorite ways, I've got 2 applications for Brisk that I think are really good. One is you can use this for sub-plans. So again, not only going to save you a ton of time, but it's going to make the plans more interesting because it's about a relevant topic. Also love using it for if you anticipate students finishing early on a project. They can learn about this relevant topic, and you can even take it a step further and have it come up with comprehension questions for you right in that same Google Doc. So again, sub-plans, extension activity, maybe there's just something really cool going on in the world related to your topic and you want students to know about it. So Brisk has a ton of other features. One other that I want to show, it's a much less known tool, and it is called Phobiz. And what I love about it, you will have to, when you sign up, you'll want to make sure to switch it over to English because it is a company based out of Germany. But if you go to the digital tools, there's a lot of PD on here too. But if you go to the digital tools, there's a prompt lab, which these are a bunch of those pre-made prompts, okay? Like have it help you with icebreakers and all of those things. But there's also a chat with AI tool. And let me show you what I love about this. You can go up here and go to the settings and switch it to any of these large language models, even GPT-4. So you can access GPT-4 technology. You can also go up here and modify the role. The default is you're a helpful and friendly assistant, but you might change this to you're an expert 9th grade biology teacher, right? So you can really customize this tool. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because the keynote yesterday was all about privacy and student data and protecting that. And because this company is based out of Germany, the privacy laws are much more strict, and it is going to protect student data. And I've been using this tool a lot, and at every corner, it always says, don't use student data, don't use student data. I've even had it kick back a response to me and say, nope, this includes a name. You need to change that. So when it comes to student data, I'm really excited about tools like this that prioritize that and protect that. Any other, feel free to share in the chat. Do you have any other really cool tools, AI tools that you've learned about in this conference? Go ahead and throw them in the chat. Yeah, no problem. So I want to show, let's see, let me get back to my presentation here. We're in the closing, we're in the final stretch. And these are some additional resources that you might find helpful. So Daniel Fitzpatrick, he is the creator of the Prepare model framework or the prep prompting framework. And he's got a book called The AI Classroom. It's a great book. It's very nerdy. It talks about the history of AI. And you can, what I like about it is you can open it up to almost any spot in the book and start reading, and it's gonna be engaging. You don't have to read it front to back. There's also this list of best AI tools for teachers. And of course, it's just one person's opinion, but it's Andrew Davies. He's another TikToker who talks about AI. He talks a lot about elementary teachers using AI, which is, I focus more on secondary. So he's a great person to follow. And in this resource doc that I gave all of you, you can see up here, here it is, the list of AI tools for teachers, okay? So it's just a really simple Canva website. And what I like about it is it's not putting every tool on there. It's just a few. But for everyone, there's kind of a summary and even a video that you can watch about the tool. Okay. So check this out. And again, don't have FOMO here of AI tools, because like I haven't checked all of these out, I'll be honest, right? There's so many out there. And so just find a couple that work really well for you. And I just want to keep encouraging people to do that. The other resource that I want to point out is this AI for Education prompt library. So I'm going to bring you there next. Yes, I will. Someone wanted me to add the resource in the chat. This is to that big resource doc that'll get you everywhere. I'm going to throw in the chat this specific website, which I think is great for if you want to share, some of these tools with other people. This is just a really nice. I was going to make something like this, and then I saw his, and I was like, nope, I'm just going to share. I'm going to share what he made because this is awesome. And then this other one, AI for Education, throw this one in there too. This is an incredible resource. There's 3 parts of this website that I think are really helpful. And number 1 is this prompt library. What I love about this is it has prompts sorted by category for all of these different ideas. Let me check out the authentic assessment. Yes, this is a great one. So it'll give you a prompt, so you could copy and paste this right into ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. Add in your own specifics, and these prompts are tested. And I tested these prompts. I did, but these were tested by multiple people, so these are going to be good. There's also an example prompt for each one, and then there's tips on how to make it work for you. So especially for someone who's just learning, this will come to you. This will become second nature the more you prompt, but it sure is helpful to see an exemplar first. And that's what this website does. The second part of this website I really like is the curriculum. If you are interested in starting this conversation with students, I recommend going here. I like these better than Common Sense Media lessons, and those are great lessons. But you can tell these were made by an AI expert and someone who's great at writing lesson plans. So I've actually done every activity in here. We're going to be rolling these out at my district later this year and the beginning of next year. But they're really fun and engaging lessons for kids. And the best part is whether you're going to just model the tool or students are actually going to get into ChatGPT themselves, these lessons work for both scenarios. So even if you don't have kids on AI yet, or you teach middle school or elementary school, you can still do this as a whole class just on your computer. So this is a great spot. The last one on here is if you go to the resource hub and you just go to downloadable resources, there's a ton of stuff here. That's where I got this example of the 3 different prompts. I recommend following them on LinkedIn. Surprisingly, I've gotten a lot of information. The CEO of this company, Amanda Bickerstaff, follow her on LinkedIn because she is always sharing some really cool graphics and summaries that are just really shareable and easy to use. So I recommend you check those out. Last couple things I want to say. I gave a similar presentation at a nearby school district earlier this year. And at the end, someone said, "Wow, this is great. It's like I don't even have to think anymore." And I was horrified. I'm like, no, that's not what I was trying to get across here. I hope you're still thinking. And if AI is thinking for you, you're doing it wrong. And a lot of people are talking about, will AI replace teachers? If AI can think for you, then it can replace you. But what it should be doing instead is freeing up some of your time and some of your energy to take things to that next level, right? And the human element is so important here. Again, it's really vital that you look over everything and put your final stamp of approval on it. And don't just use it to keep doing what you're already doing. ChatGPT can make some really unengaging lessons. It can make some really low-level quizzes and multiple choice tests that are not going to be what's best for students. Okay, so just keep that in mind and try to use it as something that's going to elevate your thinking. With the last few minutes, I would love to encourage people. I have a quick exit survey, and I'm always interested in feedback. So I'm going to put the exit survey in the chat. And also, I would love to connect with you in the future. Again, I'm all over socials. If you go to my link tree, my email is in there too. So feel free to contact me with questions. If you're interested in AI training for your own school, I provide that as well, usually virtual since you are from all over the place here. So I encourage you to fill out that feedback form. Let's connect in the future. And thank you again for coming to this session. Make sure you stay tuned for Eric Kurtz. I'm so excited I've seen him speak before, and he's very inspiring. So make sure you hang out, and thanks for stopping by. Let me know your questions.